Everyone, welcome. You're listening to 27 Degrees SAG, which is the Galactic Center in your astrology chart. And that is where all of the knowledge from the universe is poured out for us to receive and to do with what we will, especially on planet Earth, where you have your free will. And don't forget, we are here on youtube.com. And next week, I want to just quickly say it is going to be an astrology update on the next show, which is April 27th. And we are going to be talking about the eclipses. And we have got some wonderful aspects coming up. So please mark it on your calendar right now for a reminder to come back next Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Pacific Time. And thanks so much for coming along with us this evening. Please join us in the chat room. We have so much fun answering the questions and, of course, listening to all your comments from the chat room. And I want to introduce my guest this evening. What a topic. What a book. I cannot wait to get into it with you, but I want to give you a little bit of background. We have a wonderful guest, and his name is Steve Black. And this year marks 32 years of his work on the radio, and 29 of those years were served in Detroit. And he's also had a hand in programming at multiple stations, in syndication for more than 21 years. And he has also written and produced more than 2,500 shows and specials that are now in syndication. And they have been aired in 170 radio stations across the United States. This guy is talented, he's huge, and he's seasoned. And I'm so proud to have him on the show.
Seasoned, I was expecting old.
And he's full of wisdom. He's going to show me how to do it, I'll tell you that. He's also been involved with interviews with a lot of bands and musicians. And his first book that he authored was released in 2014, entitled Black to Light. And that was his true life story of love, adventure, music, cancer, death, despair, tragedy, and triumph, while interacting with rock and roll royalty. His current book that has just been released 2021 is a science fiction thriller, and it is called The Last Child. He also, if that isn't enough, okay, he's also sitting on the board of directors for Gilda's Club Metro Detroit, and they have helped to raise over $160,000 for cancer patients in the Detroit metro area. That's huge. Thank you so much for your work and your service. I'd like to bring you to the screen at this time. Put your hands together for Steve Black. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you so much, Kimla.
All right.
I'm blushing. Such a big intro.
You are. But you know what? You have, and that is amazing what you have accomplished so far in your young life. So my hat's off to you. You know, we have such a wonderful group that comes in, and they're going to be asking us questions. So I may interrupt you just to get a little bit of questions coming in from the chat area. But you are a surprising author, even to yourself. So how did that all begin? If you would like to kind of take us along on that little background first as we get started.
All right. So I think the best place to jump on board is my first wife. Her name was Sabrina. She was also on the radio. And we got engaged. We're going to get married in Hawaii. And in our flight, we were going to stop in San Francisco for a night on the way to Hawaii. And in San Francisco, she began to feel very bad to the point of where she needed to go to the hospital. So we went to the hospital and she was diagnosed with stage 4 Hodgkin's disease, cancer, 2 days before we were set to get married.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And it's hard to encapsulate who she was, but a short version is she told the doctor, no, I'm not going to start cancer treatment. I'm getting married in 2 days in Hawaii. You're going to give me whatever medication I need to make that happen. And then I'll see the doctor when I get home. And the doctors fell in line and did what she said. We went and got married. And we had a little over 6 years of marriage before she passed away. It was almost all a nonstop battle. And a lot of roller coasters in there, but that is where the first book came from. She did some journaling of what it was like, not so much as a radio personality, but she couldn't take that away from herself. She was a sportscaster and just kind of wrote what it was like to go through cancer, starting out life as a beautiful, attractive sportscaster, female, kind of breaking boundaries in Detroit to now I'm bald and I'm, dealing with life and death and just, all of that stuff that cancer patients have to go through. So one of her dying wishes was to have some of that journal published. And I tried to write her story and failed, which is something that happens quite often when you're onto something good. You fail a few times in that process. I tried to hire
It's called the first draft.
Yeah, I tried to hire an author to write the story. But whenever I would give what was written to people who knew her, they all just agreed, no, you're not capturing her. And it was suggested to me, why don't you write your story, your autobiography? And when you get to the parts of your life that you shared with her, use her journal. And that's what I did. And when members of her family read it and her closest friends, they all said, oh my God, that's her. And so that's where the first book came from.
Wow. What an endeavor. That's fabulous. And that book is entitled From Black to Light. Yep.
Play on our last name, obviously, and then also trying to find some light in the tragedy,
Right. It is a remarkable, I want to say, gift in so many ways to assist one another to the finish line, so to speak, for a lifetime here on planet Earth, and is one of those heartwarming things that you never know how much you love someone until you go through that with them. And we're only privileged. Very few of us are privileged in order to do that. So I know that was a huge gift. I'm sure lessons and tragedies along the way. So I'm sure this book is really heartfelt and a wonderful gift that you have given the planet for all of us, who are close to or surviving or battling cancer, as well. We all like to see it from different perspectives, because sometimes we get caught up. We get all caught up in day-to-day stuff or just pain or shock, of what's happening. So
I didn't know, and it didn't matter, but I guess understand is a good way to say it. I didn't understand why she wanted that story out. I didn't understand how telling people what we went through would help. Mm-hmm. And one day my publisher called me and said, hey, there's an elderly couple up in northern Michigan. And it was the opposite. It was the husband was going through cancer and the wife was the caregiver. And they were significantly older than us. Sabrina was diagnosed at 29 and died at 35. Mm-hmm. But he said, I just want you to know they read your book and they were so moved by how close the two of you were and how you shared your life and embraced your moments that their nicknames for each other now are Steve and Sabrina. That's what they call each other.
Oh my gosh, see?
And I realized that's why she wanted this published. I didn't understand it until I got that comment back. And I went, that's it. I understand now why she made me promise that I would put the story out.
That is huge validation. Just huge. Just huge. That is something that, just to take that on, like you were saying, you failed at first, but you found a way, you found a format that worked. And congratulations. We have a comment in the chat room from Sheila. She says, so sorry, Steve, but so many lessons learned, and congrats on the book you and she wrote together. You hear her from afar.
Yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you. That's lovely. And so in between all of your radio work and all your fundraising and everything that you have done, you decided something must have inspired you for the next book. So tell us about that.
Okay, so this started with, I was a mix of emotions. I've always been a very science person first, but never totally relinquished the sort of religious side. I'm not overly religious, but I would say spiritual, the spiritual side. And they wrestled with each other a lot. And after Sabrina died, and even after I found Gina and got remarried, and just, she's the most magnificent person I've ever met.
Hello, Gina.
There was this mix of, well, if I love science so much, how come that couldn't cure Sabrina? How come there wasn't an answer there? And if I believe in God or spirituality so much, how come they couldn't cure Sabrina? How come she died anyway? So I needed a place for these two things to fight. And I thought, what if I created a fictional world with a problem so big that science didn't have the answer and spirituality didn't have the answer, and then I could take the journey. And so that's when it just hit me all of a sudden. What if you were the last child ever born and science could not find an answer? People just simply stopped being born. And spirituality wouldn't necessarily have an answer either. So with those two parameters, I took the journey of what that would be like, what the world would be like, how things would change, how just by the simple fact that he was born and nobody else was, Kyle Jordan, the character, became the most famous person in the history of the world.
Wow.
Instantly globally famous for doing nothing other than being born. Wow. And then you get into, how does the world respond? In America, almost all of our struggles are based on how do we can keep our supply of whatever it is, a supply of money, a supply of food, a supply of air, a supply of anything. But if nobody can be born and people continue to die at their normal rate, we suddenly have a surplus of everything. So the entire concept of living changes. The entire concept of hoarding wealth to pass on to your kids and their kids. You don't have kids and their kids. You don't need to hoard wealth. You need to hoard time. And it became such an incredible ground to play in and to search for answers. And so I thought of the biggest questions I could possibly think of and attacked them all in a science fiction way.
Wow. So in this, I haven't read it, but in this book, were there animals that were giving birth or not?
Do we want to do spoilers?
Oh, sorry.
I'm okay with it, but I don't know if some people might want to buy the book. I don't know how many surprises we want.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry.
I mean, I'm okay with it, however you want to go.
I knew I would get into that. Well, it's funny because I had the same question pop into my head. What if something happened where the fertility rate completely dropped? And for one reason or another. And it was impossible to have children the normal way. I was going through, and before I contacted you, because I was just fascinated that we both kind of came upon this together. But I would think that with science and with spirituality, trying to clone or trying to, replicate people, or and if there's just one child, what, and of course he'd be famous, but what a sense of value about life itself. And does this child consent, or do the parents consent for him to be cloned? Or, what happens there? That is a whole nother kind of Pandora's box.
Yeah.
There, as well, as we are now seeing the cloning and the mixing of the DNA and what they're doing for stem cell research and things
Sure.
like that.
And all of that played a role in the story as well. Any good science fiction has to have the science part.
Besides,
And if we cannot continue as a species through propagation, then the next logical choice, once you've done all of your studies and tried cloning and tried everything else that you can try, is to extend life, right? And prevent ourselves from dying.
Right.
And so that's kind of the journey that the book takes. That's where the science part goes. And then we get into the question of how many artificial implants does one have before they're no longer an enhanced human? They're just not human anymore. Like, where is the line? Where does that cross?
Right.
And we're forced to evolve because there's no other way for the species to survive. Is that okay? Is it okay to not be human anymore if that's the only way to continue? And those are the questions. And I didn't necessarily answer them. I just posed the questions. Some of the characters have different answers and experience things differently, but that's the journey of the book. Yeah.
Oh. Well, it's funny how with everything that, we were talking about, the prescriptions and medical turns of events, and how it affects our DNA, and how it will affect it down the road. Because a lot of this kinds of things, they really don't know about until way later on. For example, my mother had a very hard time carrying her pregnancy full term. She had Rh negative factor. And so she had 6 miscarriages, and the doctor finally gave her a drug that she finally had my older sister. And then she had my brother and myself. However, with this particular medication that she was so thrilled to have at the time, it left my sister sterile. It left my brother with complications, and I'm still on guard for all of the above. And we have to, we do have to tell the doctor that we are this type of child that has affected our DNA and has actually affected our reproductive organs as well. So down the road, you never know what science, what repercussions, is happening, and that type of thing,
And we're
because
getting closer to where they may be able to turn the switches on and off within your body in your lifetime.
Right.
Just go in and flip the old DNA switch. I mean, we're not yet, but boy, we're close.
Right. So in your opinion, as we're going through, trying to bring, trying to extend longevity within the body itself and within the life itself. Um, what did that bring to you? Just trying to think, oh my gosh, I mean, desperado. I mean, how do we do this? Do we do it through, how do we do that? How do we do that? I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me, of course, is food, is the food that you're eating, right?
Right.
I mean, this is something that right now we're looking at global consciousness. We're looking at how the entire planet can raise their consciousness and their awareness as to how to improve the body, how to improve the spirit while it's in the avatar itself. And with this kind of awareness, I think this is huge for exactly what's happening on the planet right now, right?
Yes, but we also have to factor in the speed of change, because what's happening now isn't what's going to happen 10 years from now. It's, things are changing incredibly quickly.
Quickly.
And, that was kind of among the many challenges of writing a story that starts with a child being born and advances, from first chapter to last chapter is about 85 years. In a fairly short book, is you have to jump and leap and go. Well, I don't know what the world's going to be like in 10 years, much less 85 years. So you try to envision these things, and you try to, one of the things we came up with is, it's an actual thing. It's called the whole brain emulation, where they can scan every electronic pulse in your brain and transfer that to a computer. And so one of the thoughts I had was, well, if you couldn't propagate on Earth anymore, maybe you could somewhere on another planet. So how do we get humans to another planet? Well, if we can't go anywhere near the speed of light, maybe one way is to not have human bodies. Maybe we have robot bodies and we just implant our minds in them. So that's one of many, many possibilities, many, many options. And again, it all comes back to the question of, is that right? Is that wrong? Is it right for some people? Is it not right for other people? It's fun to ask big questions because you don't really have an absolute answer.
Right.
It's the exploration that I think is the good part.
Right. And there's been many, I want to say, people that attest to the fact that that's exactly what's happening now. And that you can travel to Mars, you can travel, between the two poles instantaneously. You can travel to the moon and back. You can travel not from what we're seeing on our news and our timeline, but there is a whole nother back end story. It reminds me of the Wizard of Oz when she pulls the curtain back, and here's just a man doing all of this work. And so this is exactly some of the things that we had been talking about before, about the colonization of Mars and about the different motherships and things like that that are incubating, avatars, and are they going to have souls? What does that mean for us?
Right.
I mean, if you incubate, or if you cross the DNA, what gives that avatar the spark of life, the soul? What does that?
Can anything give that?
Can that happen?
We don't know, and we may not know until somebody tries to do it.
Right.
And then even then, there will be many failures. So we won't know if success is even possible. But it's a really, really interesting thing. To me, one of the things about the soul that I never hear anybody talk about, and I address it in the book actually, is we always talk about the soul being eternal. But everybody, and I shouldn't say everybody, but most religions that religious leaders that I spoke to, all talk about the soul being attached to a body, and from that point on, it's eternal. But eternal means that the soul existed before it came to a body.
Right.
So where did it exist? Where did it come from? So as much as humans talk about afterlife, nobody really talks about pre-life. I just don't hear that conversation much. But if we're to believe that our souls transcend our body, then they probably transcended it before it ever got to a body. Where was it? And
Right.
then, we're one little teeny tiny planet and one little teeny tiny solar system. If there's other life out there and souls can come and go to bodies, are the same souls being used in different bodies and different planetary systems? And that's without even getting to different realities and different universes. I mean,
different dimensions.
Right.
Yeah.
We're back to questions we don't have answers for, but they're fun to talk about.
That absolutely right. Absolutely right. But if there was a way to, let's just say, incubate or procreate off planet, or let's just say in a different way, and would there be a way that you could really tell? Would there be a way that you could really tell who is an original, who is an avatar? We talk about AI a lot too. Talk about what's the percentage of AI that really makes you still a human? I mean, where do we cross the border there? Where do we cross the line? Are you 50%? It's kind of like your nationality, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
great example.
right? I mean, it's like, when do you stop saying you're that, especially in the United States?
Right.
I mean, I'm half Irish and half Swedish, but my kids are all broken up, and you become this fractional, nationality, like a piece of this and a piece of that. When do you just become you, and you are just an earthling? And if, like you said, I mean, if you start replacing, all of your parts, they're going in that direction, really, hips, knees, livers, kidneys. I mean, where does it go to where you are?
Right.
AI.
Quite possibly. I mean, we don't know. Will there be synthetic cells at some point that are just man-made cells to replace human cells? I mean, the crazy thing about a stem cell is it's basically unassigned. You take a stem cell and it needs to become a heart. That's what it becomes. It becomes a heart cell. If it needs to become a blood cell, it becomes a blood cell. Well, what if you can get synthetic cells that do that?
Right.
I don't know. Certainly nobody knows how to do it yet. It doesn't mean that they won't.
I'm sure they're doing it.
And at some point, it's not up to me to give the definition, but at some point, when are you no longer human? If you look back at, I don't know, say Cro-Magnon, right? If you go back far enough, it wasn't like there was Cro-Magnon and then the next person born wasn't. It was this slow evolution. So if we evolve slowly enough to have, I'm going to get a hand implant because my hand hurts, and pretty soon it's, I'm going to extend my memory and get a little chip up there, and then pretty soon, at some point, you just evolve into something else as a species.
Yes, exactly. And when you really kind of take the perception that, the body has gone through this great transformation over time, things that we don't need because of the earth changing, or just because of our intelligence upgrading, or perhaps, there's 12 strands to the DNA. We are only operating on 2. The rainbow children coming in are now at 3. And you're thinking, well, maybe we were downgraded. There's stories about the fall, and and there's stories about how we blew our chance, in other words, to use all of our power in our minds and our bodies. And so now we're climbing back up again. We're kind of really at the bottom of the barrel. People don't think that. But at one time, there are stories from Atlantis, Lemuria, back when that we were all, our 12 strands were connected. We were running on a full engine, so to speak, full pistons firing. So the thing is that as we go through these biorhythms of transformation, um, do we just take for granted that these are just avatars and they're disconnected from our soul, even though they harbor our soul, and that our soul is the light of God, and uh, God can pull the light, the spirit out in another dimension. You don't need this particular avatar, but perhaps you have a light orb around you, or you are a stream of light, or perhaps, you're in another type of unit or an avatar, whether you have a bird head or an alligator body or whatever it is, from the different species that, that we have all seen in Star Wars and have all found people who have, oh, yes, they do exist. And there's a lot of different races out there, and some are very helpful people and some are not. But for our little Kyle, who is the last child on Earth, does that really help him at all? I mean, you can imagine if he's the last child, you can imagine what would be going on for him and the tremendous responsibility that would really carry for someone.
Yeah, and I try to get into a lot of different realms, including what would it feel like to have somebody pray in your name, build religions around you because you were the last one born. How would that feel? How do you process that? How do you grow up knowing that people killed in your name and you still don't know why? You still don't understand it. You didn't choose to be the last one born. You just were the last one born. And as he kind of tries to seek his own balance in the story, one of the concepts I came up with that I really like, I find a lot of comfort in it, is if I kind of see time as a spherical thing, like everything else that we see and interact with. They're all spherical in nature, whether you're talking about the tiniest particle or a planet, or even, it's more elliptical, but circling of a black hole, or it just like everything kind of has a roundness to it. So I thought, well, what if time itself is round? What if it's circular? And we live on the skin of it, always moving forward on the skin of it. But what if the God figure, what if the keeper or creator of souls existed in the middle of that sphere?
I can see that.
It would always be equally as close to the past as the right now as the future, because from the center of that circle, it is, which means, and this is the part I find helpful, whatever you have done, you are doing and will do, so it all matters. It matters 10,000 years from now because it happened. And if it happened, then it is happening and it will happen. And so I thought it brought special meaning to these really fleeting moments in life that a lot of times we take for granted. Oh, it's just a fleeting moment. It's gone and it'll never come again. Well, maybe from God's perspective, it isn't gone. Maybe if you live in the center of it, it's as equal and as real to you as what we perceive as the now or the future or the past.
Wow, that is awesome. I mean, I can really only because I say all the time. Yeah. Especially, housing different entities and different people who have passed and those kinds of things. I mean, I see it all the time. So I get that totally. That's a very hard concept to digest.
Mm-hmm.
And, seeing it that way as a circular energy, that really kind of does explain it very simply.
Yep.
I really do like that.
And
so
yeah, go ahead.
That brings the nutshell about this the sphere theory, about you always exist. You just, that's your eternal, right? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I obviously can't prove it. It's just something that helps me kind of cope.
right, right.
Yeah.
That would explain the eternal movement and the roundness of going round and round and round and round.
Yeah.
But having this kind of perspective, does it really change at the moment the value of your morals or your decisions? I mean, are we at the point where we are totally controlled and totally empowered as to every single moment and thought and word and gesture is coming from the highest part of us? Don't we learn lessons by freaking out sometimes or
Sure.
making mistakes and
Absolutely.
contrasting, the contrast everybody talks about, to really evolve to where there's no contrast, to where there's no um, I want to say, yang to the yin. That's a whole different dimension, I would think.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in, the moments. You don't get to moment B without going through moment A. That's our linear existence. That's the way we live. It may not be how a God figure perceives us, but that's how we live. And until we figure out another way, then that's always going to be, the key to everything. Like you said, whether it be um, our own self-centered morals or, applying somebody else's morals to your situation, whatever it is, that's just part of a linear existence.
Yeah. It's funny because studying all the different religions that I have, they all lead to the same road. Once you get down there, it's just kind of different ways of the different ceremonies or um, different people who are helping from different names or whatever that is. Uh, but I'm, I'm just thinking that there's so much going on that we do not know about, that if we did have that perception, I think that's what would trigger a huge transformation.
Yeah.
And yeah, right?
Yeah. Well, there's also this endless chase of, every time you learn something new, you now learn new questions to ask about the thing that you just learned. Those questions didn't exist before because you didn't know about the thing. So now you have new questions and you explore those. And when you find answers, it opens the door to new questions. So the exploration, I think the exploration it's the journey that's the important part. Because I don't think you ever get to the end.
Right, right. You don't get to the end, but the journey, the decisions you choose, or the experiences that you create or co-create or manifest, um, is what goes into your resume, so to speak.
I like that.
That is always going on,
Yeah.
always going on. When I talk to people on the other side, it's very easy for me, the veil doesn't exist. A lot of times I wish we had, but the woman, a lot. But they can come on any different age so that you can recognize them. Whether they're a child or whether they're older or and they wear period clothing to let you know who they are and that kind of a thing. And is that illusionary? Is that by choice? Is that something that you can just reach out to any dimension and create what you want. So can you create a new life without what we know as creation? Can we just manifest a new life?
I haven't pondered it. I don't know. I really haven't spent any time, thinking about it.
If we can break through the boundaries and talk to people on the other side who have already finished their life here and they're either resting in peace, helping in another dimension, whatever they're doing at that particular time. If we get to the highest point in our particular manifestations, in our empowerment, I have a really strong feeling we could manifest life itself.
Ooh.
Through our own spark of God inside of ourselves. You hear about that is if we carry God inside of ourselves as a spark in our souls, do we need permission, or can we manifest that boom, just like that?
Right.
Are we that powerful?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I kind of hope not. I've seen us drive cars.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you should see me try to operate a sewing machine. Yeah. I can't believe I haven't sewn my fingers together.
Right.
Yeah. Cars are easy for me. Sewing machines, not so much.
Right.
But yeah, that's something that I was kind of thinking to myself, because, you get to the point where a lot of people are talking about co-creating, manifestation, these kinds of things. They have ways that they concentrate and boom, synchronicity happens, and there it is in your life. And, and it's one of those wonderful things. So, yeah, you never know. You just never know. So what's your next big project, Steve?
I'm always working on something. I have started the next book, which will be actually a continuation of the one I just finished. So it'll be book 2 of The Last Child.
Oh, this is an open-ended one?
Yes.
Oh, this is great.
And
so are we
a couple of publishers that I spoke with when I was, looking to get the book published, they both said, well, whether we come to an agreement or not, you have to write the next book. Like as soon as they got to the end, they're like, yeah, we need more. Give me more. So I'm like, all right. So I am in process with that. I hope to, I'd like to remain in radio the rest of my life, because I've done it for pretty much all of my adult life, even if it's just a dabble here and there. And other than that, I just want to write books.
Wow. Awesome. Yeah, well, I think you're onto something here, because, with everybody, I want to say, just trying to get to the next level of consciousness. Everybody wants to know that they are on the road to being awakened or enlightened. And, there's a lot of gurus out there that when they want to leave their body, they meditate and they bring their spirits up and out of the body, and they leave the body behind. And
create. That's always been my thing.
Yeah.
Regardless of the art, there's something special about making something, about having an idea and then turning it into a thing. Yeah. And along the way, as I've gotten a little older and have gone through, I always say that 2 best decisions I made in my life were my 2 weddings, the two marriages. And that was the key point. None of this carries anywhere near as much meaning if I didn't have somebody to share it with. It's the creating of the thing that is the fun, but the meaning of it is then sharing that thing.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's one of those things where just creating anything,
Yeah.
and creation is what we were talking about before, through pregnancy and that creation um, is probably one of the most meaningful things ever. And next to that is what you really experience with your own talents or your own gifts. And those may change, from time to time, where you have great gifts of different qualities or different interests and things like that as you go through life. But to really kind of have the focus to really get to the end, I think is so, isn't that rewarding? When you pick up your book, isn't that just rewarding?
Yes. Especially the book. I've done a lot of things in my years. First time I recorded an album and held up my own CD. Wow, that was cool. And there's never been anything. I think because I just never pictured it. As a kid, I knew I'd be on the radio. You could feel it. As a 5-year-old, I kind of felt like that would happen. I don't know why. It seemed impossible, but it didn't. I should say it seemed unreal, but possible. But writing a book, that seemed impossible. And now I have 2 of them and another one in the works. So yeah, it feels more rewarding to me than any other piece of art I've ever done.
So do you feel like when you were writing the book, maybe it was like coming through you, like you were being channeled?
Well, I guess I would say I don't know what it's like to be channeled, so I'm not sure. Mostly, I just kind of have ideas, and I'm kind of a visual person. I kind of almost picture it like, well, if this was a movie, this is what it would look like, and I kind of write it from the visual standpoint. And then because I'm an audio engineer, I also tend to add that into the mix more than most. I try to include all the senses when you're reading the book. I'll mention how something smells or how it feels on your skin or whatever, but I also tend to include how things sound, probably more than most.
So was there a soundtrack going in your head as you were writing the book?
Sometimes, yeah. This one in particular, because it involves so many things that I didn't know about. There was a ton of interviews, so a lot of research. For instance, as the last child was being born, I don't have any children. I've never been in a birthing room. So I called up an OBGYN that I knew and interviewed. What is it like? What does the room look like? How many people are in there? How many machines are in there? What is your normal day? When you get the call that she's in labor, how long does it take you to get to the hospital? Like all that stuff. When it got to clones, I called scientists who do cloning. Hey, how is a clone created? What is the technique? How do these things work? I ended up inventing a disease that takes place in the book. So I sat down with doctors and, okay, so how do we create cellular decay? And if so, what are the symptoms and how does all this work? And then for the spiritual side, I interviewed priests and imams and rabbis, and I just tried to get their take. Okay, if somebody came to you and suddenly nobody else could be born, what do you tell your people? People come to you for advice? What do you tell them? So instead of always just trying to write it from my perspective, if there were things I didn't know because I wanted the journey myself, I wanted to discover myself, I just went out and asked the questions.
Wow. How long did that take you?
A little over 5 years.
5 years?
Yeah. I did take about a 2-year break, but yeah, it took a little over 5 years to gather all the research, to know what questions to ask, to create it all and then write it. Well,
then you have a lot of fabulous right-on information, right on. That's amazing. Well, that's amazing. And so when you compiled it and put it all together, I'm sure you saw something like you said, a movie. So I think maybe this is the start of the movie sequel. Netflix.
I love films. If
Yeah.
anything I did ever turned into a film, I'd be happy about it. Why? I mean, just because I love the medium. I didn't realize it until probably 30 years into my radio career, and I'm at 32 now, maybe 25 years in, that even being on the radio as a storyteller, you're still telling stories. It's an art form, whether I'm taking a photograph because I do still photography, or you're making a movie, you're talking about an experience on the radio, whatever you're doing, you're still just trying to communicate an emotion,
right,
or a series of emotions, or whatever it is. And the book is no different.
Right. So how can we get a hold of this book?
They're both on Amazon. That's the easiest way. I get a little less money, but that's the easiest way for people to find it. Is go on Amazon. Unfortunately, with my current book, there are about 30 different things called The Last Child, and there are apparently a whole bunch of people named Steve Black. So it's not the easiest one to find, but but it's on there, and it has like the coolest cover ever. So
yeah, hold it up. Oh, there it is. Wow. Yeah, that is beautiful. I love that image. That's beautiful.
And if you're a little less sci-fi, but you're more interested in, like I said, the cancer struggles and the rock and roll stories, that's the first book, and that's on Amazon still too.
Black to Light. There you go. Wonderful. And are you doing any more projects or any more fundraising?
So I'm on the board. I'm a board of director for Gilda's Club Detroit, which I think there's about 25 of us on the board now. And that is, if you're familiar, Gilda Radner. It was her charity originally. And it's like, we're Detroit based, but they're all over the place. And, one of Gilda's dreams was that everybody should have a place to go. Nobody should face cancer alone, and that they should never pay a dime for any of the support, any of the care, any of the education that you need to get through that battle. So we're just kind of continuing on Gilda's mission. Yeah.
Oh, that's fabulous. Thank you so much for doing that work. That's wonderful. If we have anyone out there that would like to donate to that, how do we go about doing that?
Yeah, you can just, I hate to be so basic, but you can just Google that too. If you Google Gilda's Club, it'll come right up. Obviously, the Detroit chapter is where I'm located, but there might be one in your own hometown. I know that the big ones are Detroit and New York.
Okay. So. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. All righty. So before we leave today, I want to ask you a question. If there is anything that you would like to tell someone starting out and wanting to go into radio, what would you tell them?
I would actually ask them the question, and that is, do you love it? Do you love it enough that you don't care that you're not going to get paid for a while? Do you love it enough that you don't care if you ever really get paid? Because if you love something and you do it, then you're going to be happy whether you make a lot of money or you don't make a lot of money. And as somebody who's suffered with depression and loss and all the different things that I've been through, the most important thing in the world is, can you be happy?
Right.
That's all that matters. Is you don't chase dollars, right? There's a famous old blues song about, I've never seen a U-Haul behind no hearse. And you can't get any better than that. You can't take it with you. So spend your time and your money on the things you can take with you.
That's so true.
So if you love it, pursue it.
Yeah. Yeah. And what are the things that make you happy?
I already mentioned sharing. That's the number one.
Right.
After that, I still get kind of sketchy sometimes. I still struggle with my own happiness. Music is way up on the list, and ideas. That's why I love conversation so much, because you get new ideas, you get new thoughts, you get new things to explore. So yeah, I'm a big science fan and a big science fiction fan, but again, that's because it sparks ideas. And then
Yeah.
you take whatever ideas you have and you have conversations and they turn into more things and then maybe even a project somewhere along the line.
Absolutely. And usually very late at night in someone's kitchen. Oh gosh, this has been so lovely. Steve, thanks so much for coming along with us for this hour. And thank you so much to Sheila and Ivy and Bill. And I know Carl is listening and everyone else in the chat room. Thank you so much. And thank you to my producer as well for helping out on the show. We sure do. We sure do need you. So thank you for all of the support and coming along. Don't forget, next week, I am going to be giving you all of the astro updates about the solar eclipses and the lunar eclipses coming up. I've got so much information to tell you. We're also going to take your questions in the chat room as well. So we'll be doing a couple psychic readings. So do think about your questions. Join us in the super chat, youtube.com. Thanks so much for coming along again, Steve, and run out there and get that book. I know I'm going to, because I had this question in my head before I found Mr. Black. So I know that all of you have probably thought about it as well. So we want to go on this journey so that we can prepare ourselves for number 2. And good luck to you, Steve, and all you do. And thank you so much for coming along. Until next time, may the angels protect you and guide you. Good night, everyone.